I never thought I'd reach an age where I'd question my own son's love for me. But sometimes, life or people force you to. My name is Margaret. I'm 67, and after losing my husband 5 years ago, my only son, Ethan, became my entire world. Or at least, I thought he did. My husband and I built everything from scratch, a small construction business, a cozy home, and a lifetime of savings. When he passed, the company and most of our assets were left to me, with the understanding that one day it would go to Ethan. He was my pride. Smart, charming, successful in his own right, or so I believed. But lately, something in him had changed. He started calling more often, but not to ask how I was doing. "Mom, have you thought about putting the house in my name yet?" "Mom, I could help you manage the accounts. It's safer that way." Or the worst one, "Mom, you don't want to deal with all that money stress, do you? Let me handle it." Each time, his tone was too smooth, too practiced. At first, I told myself he was just being a caring son. But one night, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. He was in the living room, speaking on the phone. I was just coming down for water. His voice was low, serious. "Yeah, once Mom signs over the house, I'll be set. She doesn't need it anyway." I froze on the stairs, clutching the railing. She doesn't need it anyway. That one sentence shattered years of love and trust. For days, I couldn't sleep. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe I'd misunderstood. But the doubt was there now, eating me alive. That's when I decided to test him. If my son truly loved me, he'd stand by me even if I had nothing. If he didn't, well, then I'd finally know what kind of man he'd become. So I began to plan. A week later, I invited Ethan to dinner. He arrived with that perfect smile, the one he knew I couldn't resist. "Hey, Mom, you look great," he said, giving me a quick hug before sitting down. But I noticed his eyes weren't on me. They were on the envelope of bills near my purse. As we ate, I played along, asking about his work, his girlfriend, his new car. He complained about money as usual: inflation, taxes, stress. That's when I decided to drop the bomb. I sighed and looked down, pretending to wipe a tear. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." He immediately leaned forward. "What's wrong, Mom?" I lost everything." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "The business investments, the savings account. It's all gone. A bad deal, a scam maybe, I don't even know. I'm sorry, honey, there's nothing left, not even the house soon." I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. For a moment, he was silent, just staring at me. Then his jaw tightened. "You lost everything." I nodded slowly. Leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "How could you be so careless, Mom? You know that money was supposed to secure our future." That word, our. It hit me like a knife. I expected concern, a hug, maybe anger mixed with empathy. But all I saw was panic, not for me, but for what he'd lose. I tried to hide my trembling hands. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I don't know what to do now. I might have to move into that small apartment across town." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, without meeting my eyes, he muttered, "Yeah, maybe that's for the best. I mean, I don't have space for you right now." That was it. "No, I'll take care of you." "No, we'll figure it out together." Just a cold dismissal. That night after he left, I sat by the window for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. It was true then. My son, my own flesh and blood, didn't love me. He loved what I had. But if he thought I was done, he was wrong. Because the next morning, I decided to push the test even further. If Ethan's heart had truly turned to greed, I would make him face it. So I called him again, my voice weak and trembling. "Ethan, I need your help. They're coming to repossess the house. Could you come by tomorrow?" There was a pause on the line, then a reluctant sigh. "Fine, Mom, but don't expect me to fix your mess." I smiled sadly after he hung up. Tomorrow he'd come and I'd finally see who my son really was. But what happened next was far beyond anything I could have imagined. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I barely slept. The night had been full of questions swirling in my head. Had I gone too far? Was I being cruel to my own son? Or was this the only way to see his heart clearly? By 8 a.m., I'd already packed a few boxes, spread around the living room, a staged scene of chaos. Old photo frames, kitchen dishes, some worn-out blankets. If Ethan was coming for sympathy, he'd see a mother struggling. If he was coming for money, well, there'd be nothing left for him to find. At 9:17, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I could tell it was him, same heavy bass from his speakers, same impatient engine rev before parking. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Morning, sweetheart." He barely glanced up from his phone. "Hey, Mom." He walked past me straight into the house, looking around. "So, this is what it looks like when you lose everything, huh?" he said, air quoting the words with a smirk. I ignored the sting and forced a smile. "I told you I'm trying to pack some things before they come for the rest." He chuckled dryly. "Mom, seriously, how could you let this happen? You had a business, assets, investments. How do you just lose it all?" I trusted the wrong person, I whispered, looking down. He shook his head. Unbelievable. You know what this means for me, right? I was planning to propose to Sophie next month. We were counting on that down payment money from the property transfer. My heart sank. So that's what this is about. What else would it be about? He snapped, instantly defensive. I stood there quietly, feeling something break inside me. That tone, the coldness, I didn't even recognize my own son anymore. Ethan, I said softly, if I had nothing, would you still care about me? He frowned. Of course I care about you, Mom, but love doesn't pay bills. I have responsibilities. You should have thought about that before losing everything. There it was. No hesitation, no guilt, just disappointment not in my pain but in his empty pockets. I nodded slowly. I see. He sighed, frustrated, running his hands through his hair. Look, I don't have time for this. Sophie's waiting in the car. We'll talk later. He turned to leave but stopped when he noticed a brown envelope on the kitchen table. What's this? He asked. I froze. That wasn't supposed to be part of the act. Oh, that's just some old papers, I lied quickly. But he didn't buy it. He walked over and picked it up. Inside were a few documents, the real deed to the house, still under my name, and a small note my lawyer had written reminding me about my inheritance trust. Ethan's eyes widened. Wait, you said you lost everything. My heart pounded. I did. He slammed the papers down. No, you did. You lied to me. His voice was sharp, echoing off the walls. I'd never seen that look in his eyes, anger mixed with greed. Why would you test me like this, Mom? What's wrong with you? Tears welled up in my eyes, but I stood my ground. Because I needed to know, Ethan. I needed to know if you loved me or the money. He laughed bitterly. You think love pays rent? You live in a fantasy. I'm trying to build a life and you're here playing games. Games, I whispered. I gave up my youth for you, my comfort, my savings. Everything your father and I worked for, we did it so you'd have a future. And you call that a game? He stared at me, jaw clenched, eyes cold. Then he said something that made my heart shatter into dust. Maybe if you didn't have all this money, I wouldn't have to pretend to care so much. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. He realized what he'd said only after it was too late. His expression softened, guilt flashing for a brief second. Mom, I didn't mean. But I raised my hand. Don't, please don't. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, sighing heavily. Fine, believe whatever you want. But don't expect me to come running when this little test blows up in your face. And with that, he left. I stood there in the quiet house, tears streaming down my face, hearing his car pull away. That was the moment I knew the truth. My son, the boy I'd loved more than my own life, had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. But I wasn't finished yet. Because if greed had taken my son, maybe love could bring him back. Later that evening, I sat in my late husband's study, holding an old photo, Ethan at 5 years old, smiling, holding a toy hammer next to his father. Where did that boy go? I picked up the phone and made a call to Mr. Harris, our longtime lawyer and family friend. Harris, it's me. I think it's time we activate the second clause. He paused. Are you sure, Margaret? This will change everything. I nodded. I'm sure. He needs to see what truly matters, even if it means losing me for a while. He agreed to handle it the next morning. And as I hung up, I whispered to myself, let's see, my dear son, what you do when love, not money, becomes the test. A week later, Ethan received a letter. Inside was a short message. Dear Ethan, I've moved away for a while. Don't look for me. There's a key in this envelope. It opens something you'll soon find important. Love, Mom. The key, of course, was to something that would reveal the truth, but he didn't know that yet. Because the very next day, a lawyer would call him, telling him his mother had been declared missing, and that she'd left behind one final letter that could either heal his guilt or destroy him forever. Studio narrator tone for YouTube ending. What do you think, everyone? Do you believe Ethan truly loved his mother deep down, or was his greed too strong to ever change? Speech balloon, tell me in the comments, if you were in the mother's place, would you have tested your child like this? And don't forget to subscribe. When Ethan got the call from his mother's lawyer, his world stopped. Missing, he repeated, gripping his phone. What do you mean missing? Mr. Harris's calm voice came through the line. She left her home last week, Ethan. No one's heard from her since. The neighbors said she left with a small suitcase. There's been no activity on her bank cards. She asked me not to tell you until a week had passed. Ethan sat down hard on the couch, the envelope still clutched in his shaking hands. Inside was the small brass key and that note in her delicate handwriting. Don't look for me. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel: fear. Not fear of losing her money, but of losing her. He'd been angry. He'd said things he couldn't take back. And now she was gone. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Did she leave anything else? Any clue where she went? Mr. Harris hesitated. Just one thing, a letter she wanted you to open in my presence. Then I'm coming right now, Ethan said quickly. Half an hour later, Ethan sat across from Mr. Harris in his downtown office. The room smelled faintly of old leather and dust, the kind of place where truth and regret had lived a long time. Mr. Harris handed him an envelope, sealed with red wax. On the front, in his mother's neat handwriting, were the words, "For Ethan when you're ready to listen." Ethan broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter. He began to read aloud. My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, it means my test has gone further than I ever planned. Please understand, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to see you. Not the man you show the world, but the boy I raised, the boy who used to bring me wildflowers and say, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll always protect you." Somewhere along the way, that boy got lost. Money took him. Success blinded him. But deep down, I still believe he's in there. This key you hold opens the old wooden chest in your father's workshop, the one you used to sneak cookies from when you were little. What's inside might not be what you expect. If you find me one day, I hope it won't be because of guilt, but because of love. Mom. Ethan felt the words burn into him. His throat tightened. For years, he'd brushed off her affection as overbearing, her care as clingy. He'd pushed her away, thinking love was measured by success and security. But now her voice, her handwriting, her absence, it all came crashing down. He stood suddenly. The chest! I know where it is. An hour later, Ethan pulled into the old family home's driveway. The house felt strange, now lifeless. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like forgotten memories. He made his way to the back, into his late father's workshop, the one his mother had kept untouched for years. There it was, the wooden chest, old, scratched, but still sturdy. He knelt down and inserted the brass key. Click. The lid creaked open. Inside were stacks of letters, photos, and an old leather-bound journal. On top was another note. Start here. He opened the journal. The first page was written by his father, addressed to him. To my son Ethan, if you're reading this, your mother must have decided you're ready to understand what we built. The company, the money, none of it matters if you lose the people who love you. Remember, son, the true inheritance is not wealth, but the love that keeps you human. Dad. Ethan's vision blurred. He turned the pages slowly, letters from his mother through the years, each one written on his birthday. She kept them all, every note, every tiny piece of love she never got to say out loud. And then at the very bottom, he found something else, an envelope addressed to Sophie, his fiancée. Confused, he tore it open. Inside was a check and a letter. Sophie, if you truly love my son, don't marry him for what he owns. Marry him for who he becomes after losing it all. This check is for your new start away from him if you need it. Sometimes love means letting go so someone can grow. Margaret. Ethan stared at the check, $50,000. His chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe. Had Sophie known? Had she been part of this? At that exact moment, his phone buzzed, a message from her. Ethan, your mom came to see me last week. She told me everything. She said she was going to disappear for a while to make you see who you really are. I didn't tell you because she asked me not to. I'm sorry. He dropped the phone, tears falling freely now. He sank to the floor, clutching one of his mother's letters against his chest. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered over and over. I'm so sorry. For the next few days, Ethan barely ate or slept. He searched everywhere, called her friends, checked hospitals, bus stations, even police records. Nothing. Every night he sat by the window, hoping she'd call, hoping she'd forgive him. Then on the 5th night, there was a knock at the door. He opened it, and there she was. Standing in the cold, wearing her old beige coat, her eyes tired but gentle. Mom, he breathed. She looked at him quietly. You found the chest. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I found everything. I found you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan fell to his knees and hugged her. I was so wrong, he sobbed. About everything. I didn't care about the money. I just didn't want to feel small. I thought if I had more, you'd be proud of me. She held his face in her hands. Oh, Ethan. I've always been proud of you. I just wanted to see the man behind the ambition, not the mask. They stood there, both crying, holding onto each other like two broken pieces finally fitting together again. Later that night, as they sat by the fire, Margaret smiled softly. You know, your father used to say, tests of love aren't meant to hurt, they're meant to heal. Maybe now we can start healing. Ethan nodded, taking her hand. No more pretending, no more money between us. She laughed quietly. Then you'll be happy to know the inheritance is still safe, but it's in a charity fund now, helping kids who don't have parents. He looked at her, surprised, then smiled through his tears. Good, that's where it should be. For the first time in years, they sat together in silence, not awkward or forced, but peaceful. Mother and son, no money, no lies, just love. What do you think, did Ethan truly change? Would you have forgiven him if you were in his mother's place? Speech Balloon, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story will break your heart and heal it all over again. It had been 3 months since the night Ethan found his mother again. The days that followed were quiet, different. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan wasn't rushing to make deals or chasing another promotion. He'd moved back into the family home for a while, not out of guilt, but out of something deeper. Love. Every morning, he made coffee for his mother and joined her in the garden. They'd sit on the porch swing his father built, surrounded by marigolds and fading memories. Sometimes they didn't even talk. Sometimes silence said everything. One morning, as autumn leaves began to fall, Margaret placed a small box on the table beside his cup. "What's this?" he asked. "Something I should have given you long ago," she said with a smile. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was his father's old wristwatch, scratched and faded but still ticking faintly. "I thought you sold everything," he said softly. She chuckled. "Not this. This was your father's heartbeat. I kept it for when you'd finally learn to listen to time instead of racing against it." He stared at the watch, the second hand moving like a quiet whisper of forgiveness. "I don't deserve this," he said. She reached over and touched his hand. "You don't earn love, Ethan. You grow into it." Those words stayed with him for days. In the following weeks, Ethan began to change more visibly. He volunteered at the children's charity his mother had funded with their old business money. He taught young kids about work, honesty, and compassion. The same hands that once chased wealth were now building playgrounds, fixing bikes, and tying shoelaces. Margaret would visit sometimes, sitting on a bench, watching him with quiet pride. The world saw a man giving back, but she saw something else. She saw her little boy again, the one who once brought her wildflowers. One evening after a long day, Ethan came home to find his mother sitting by the fire, a soft glow on her face. She looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. "Hey, Mom," he said gently. "You okay?" She smiled faintly. "Just tired, sweetheart, tired in a good way." He sat beside her. "We've done so much. Maybe we should take that trip you always wanted, Italy, remember?" She chuckled weakly. "Maybe soon." Then she looked at him, her eyes soft but serious. "Promise me something, Ethan. Anything. If one day I'm not here anymore, don't chase what you lost. Cherish what you learned." He frowned. "Mom, don't say that." But she only smiled again. "Life doesn't promise us forever, but it gives us enough moments to make love last beyond time." That night, she went to bed early. Ethan tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Good night, Mom." She smiled and whispered back, "Good night, my heart." The next morning, when the sun rose and the birds began to sing, Ethan went to check on her. Her room was quiet. The curtains swayed gently with the breeze. She looked as if she were sleeping, a peaceful smile still on her lips. But she was gone, gone without pain, gone with peace. Ethan stood there, frozen, then slowly sank to his knees beside her bed, holding her hand in his. He didn't cry right away. He just whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to love before it was too late." A week later, at the small memorial in their backyard, friends and neighbors gathered. Ethan didn't speak much. He just read a few lines from her journal, the one she'd written before her test began. "A parent's love is the only inheritance that can't be stolen, sold, or divided. I pray my son learns that before my time runs out." He folded the page and looked up at the small crowd, his voice trembling but steady. "She was more than my mother. She was my mirror. She showed me who I was and who I needed to become." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. After everyone left, Ethan sat by the old chest in the workshop, the same one that started everything. He placed the watch on top and whispered, "I'll keep time for you now, Mom." Then he noticed something he'd never seen before, a small, hidden compartment at the bottom of the chest. Inside was a final envelope. "For my son when I'm gone." He opened it carefully. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I've gone home, not far away, just out of sight. Don't grieve too long. Instead, live with the kindness your father taught and the heart I saw in you when you cried for me as a boy. I know you'll make mistakes again, we all do. But remember, real wealth isn't what you hold. It's who holds you. I'll always hold you, my dear boy. In every sunrise, in every act of love you give the world, I'll be there. Love always, Mom." Ethan folded the letter slowly, tears falling on the ink. He smiled through them, and for the first time he didn't feel broken. He felt free. He walked out to the garden, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "I get it now, Mom. You didn't test me to see if I'd fail. You tested me so I could find my heart again." A gentle wind brushed against his face, soft and warm. He closed his eyes and smiled. "Yeah," he whispered. "I know you heard that." Years later, Ethan would keep her picture framed in his charity office. The caption beneath it read, "She taught me that love is the only inheritance worth keeping." Every child who visited would ask, "Who's that?" And he'd smile and say, "That's the woman who gave me everything even when she had nothing." What did you feel in this story's ending? Speech balloon if you were in Ethan's place. Would you have forgiven yourself or lived with the guilt forever? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story will remind you just how powerful a mother's love can be. 10 years had passed since the morning Ethan found his mother's final letter. The garden had changed. New flowers grew where her marigolds once stood. The paint on the porch was fading again, but Ethan kept it that way. He said it reminded him that love, like old wood, ages beautifully when cared for. The house, once quiet and heavy with regret, now echoed with laughter. Not his, but children's. Ethan had turned his mother's home into the Margaret Foundation, a safe space for children without families. Every corner of the house carried a memory: her favorite armchair in the reading nook, her teacup still on the shelf, her framed handwriting in the hallway that said, "Kindness is the only currency that never loses value." One afternoon, while he was helping a little girl fix her toy car, a reporter from a local newspaper arrived. "Mr. Bennett," she began, smiling, "you've become something of a legend in this town. Can we talk about what inspired all this?" Ethan smiled faintly, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's not a legend, it's just a promise I made to someone who never stopped believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." She tilted her head. "Your mother, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, she taught me that love doesn't end when someone's gone. It keeps moving through the lives we touch afterward." He looked out at the children running in the garden. "That's all I'm trying to do, pass on what she gave me." The reporter smiled. "That's beautiful." "Would she be proud of you, do you think?" He chuckled softly, eyes glistening. "I like to think she already knows." That night after the kids were asleep, Ethan sat by the fire again, the same spot where his mother had once sat during her last evening. He poured himself a cup of tea just like she used to. The clock ticked softly, his father's old wristwatch on the mantel still running. The house was quiet but not lonely. He could almost feel her presence. He whispered, "Mom, I kept my promise." "The money's gone, but the love stayed." Then he smiled, remembering her words. "Real wealth isn't what you hold, it's who holds you." He reached for a book, her journal. He'd read it 100 times, but tonight he found a page he'd never noticed before. It was tucked between 2 blank pages, faded and fragile. At the top, in her neat cursive, she'd written, "To the person my son will become." Ethan blinked, heart pounding, and began to read. "I know you'll be reading this long after I'm gone. Maybe you've built a life worth living, not for status, but for peace. Maybe you've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the hurt, but remembering the lesson. If so, then I did my job as a mother. One day, you'll look in the mirror and see your father's strength and my patience. I hope, by then, you'll also see the boy who once picked me flowers for no reason. Because that boy was perfect, not for what he had, but for who he was. And when life feels heavy again, when guilt or grief comes knocking, remember this: I never wanted your perfection, Ethan. I only wanted your heart." Ethan closed the journal and pressed it to his chest. He whispered, "You still have it, Mom. You always will." Then he looked toward the window, the moonlight spilling across the garden she once loved. He smiled. "I hope the flowers are blooming where you are." The next morning, he walked to the nearby orphanage the foundation supported. The children ran to him, shouting Uncle Ethan, and wrapping their arms around his legs. He laughed, lifting 2 of them up at once. "You're all getting too big for this." A little boy tugged on his sleeve. "Uncle Ethan, why did you name the foundation after your mom?" Ethan knelt down, his voice gentle. "Because she taught me everything good I know. She believed love could change people." The boy tilted his head. "Did it change you?" Ethan smiled softly. "More than you could ever imagine." Years later, when Ethan grew old, he often sat on the porch during sunset, surrounded by the laughter of the next generation running through the garden. He'd tell them stories, not about wealth or business, but about forgiveness, family, and second chances. Sometimes, when the light hit the window just right, he swore he could see her reflection, his mother, sitting beside him, nodding with that same warm smile. One evening, a young girl named Lily asked him, "Uncle Ethan, if your mom could come back for one day, what would you tell her?" He thought for a moment, eyes glistening. "I'd tell her thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself." Lily grinned. "I think she knows that already." He chuckled softly. Yeah, I think she does. That night, he placed the old wristwatch on his bedside table. It had stopped ticking years ago, but he never replaced the battery. Before falling asleep, he whispered, I'll see you soon, Mom. Keep a seat for me on the porch up there. And for the first time in years, as he drifted into dreams, he saw her standing in the sunlight, smiling with open arms. She whispered, Welcome home, my heart. What did this story teach you the most? Red, was it forgiveness, love, or realizing what truly matters before it's too late? Speech Balloon, share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might touch someone who needs to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional life stories like this one, where love, loss, and redemption meet in the most unexpected ways. It was a warm spring morning when the world learned that Ethan Bennett, founder of the Margaret Foundation, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 78 years old. No headlines shouted his name. No breaking news banners flashed across TV screens. But for hundreds of children across the city, and thousands beyond, it felt like the sun had dimmed a little that day. The garden at the foundation was covered in white lilies and wildflowers. Every child had brought one, because Uncle Ethan once said, Flowers are love you can touch. Inside the main hall, a portrait of Ethan and his mother hung on the wall, the same photo he'd kept in his office for decades. Below it was a plaque engraved with her words, The true inheritance of love is how many hearts it leaves behind. The staff and children gathered in silence as the oldest caretaker, Mrs. Cooper, began to speak. Mr. Bennett wasn't a rich man when he passed, she said softly, her voice breaking. But he left something money could never buy: hope, forgiveness, and a home that teaches love. The children listened quietly, some too young to fully understand death, but all of them feeling the weight of loss. Later that afternoon, as the crowd dispersed, a young woman stayed behind. She stood alone in the garden, her fingers brushing the petals of a white rose. Her name was Emily, 23 years old, one of the first children Ethan had ever taken in. He'd found her on the steps of a shelter when she was only 6. She remembered it vividly, the cold night, the hunger, and the man with kind eyes who knelt beside her and said, Don't be afraid, sweetheart. You're safe now. He became the father she never had. He taught her how to read, how to dream, how to believe. Now, years later, she stood beside his memorial and whispered, You kept your promise, Uncle Ethan. You never stopped loving us. A small breeze swept through the flowers, rustling the marigolds, the same kind Margaret once planted. Emily smiled faintly. Guess your mom's proud of you up there. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat in Ethan's old study, the same one he'd built for his mother decades ago. The walls were lined with journals, letters, and framed notes written in Margaret's graceful handwriting. As she looked around, she noticed a small, locked drawer in his desk. Inside, she found a faded envelope with her name written on it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. My dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means my journey has ended, and yours is just beginning. You were the first child I brought home, the one who taught me how to be the kind of man my mother always hoped I'd become. I'm leaving the Margaret Foundation in your hands, not because you owe me anything, but because you carry her heart better than anyone. Continue what we started. Keep planting flowers in broken hearts, and remember, love never ends, it just changes hands. Ethan. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she clutched the letter to her chest. She whispered, I'll make you proud, Uncle Ethan, I promise. The next morning, the foundation woke to a new beginning. Emily gathered the children and the staff in the courtyard. We're not saying goodbye today, she said softly. We're saying thank you for teaching us that love can survive death. She turned toward the portrait of Ethan and his mother. From now on, this place will be called the house that love built. The children clapped, cheering his name. And just for a moment, in the soft breeze that carried through the marigolds, Emily could have sworn she heard a whisper, a man's gentle voice. That's my girl. Years passed. Under Emily's care, the foundation grew beyond anyone's imagination. They opened new branches in other cities, built schools, funded homes for single mothers and children who'd lost everything. Every wall bore the same words, written in Ethan's mother's hand. Kindness is the only currency that never loses value. And every story that began there started with the same question Ethan once asked himself: what's worth more, what you earn or who you become? One rainy evening, many years later, Emily visited the old family house, now a museum dedicated to the Bennetts' legacy. She walked through the rooms slowly, the kitchen where Margaret once cooked, the living room where Ethan cried and healed, and finally, the workshop where it had all begun with a single test of love. She placed a single marigold on the wooden chest. Thank you, she whispered. For testing each other because your lesson saved so many of us." She smiled through her tears, and as thunder rolled softly outside, she turned off the lights and closed the door. The camera of memory panned slowly across the old chest, still bearing the faint mark of time and the brass key resting forever beside it. Studio narrator tone for YouTube ending. "So tell me, everyone, Rose, do you believe love really lives on through the people we touch, even after we're gone? Speech balloon, share your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading what these stories mean to you. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story will remind you that even when we lose everything, love always finds a way back." Red, would you like me to now continue with part 7, where Emily faces her own moral test years later, a new generation repeating the cycle, showing how the legacy of love is tested again? Or shall I prepare the YouTube thumbnail prompt plus text set for this full inheritance test story series? You said, part 7 now. ChatGPT said, "Perfect. Red, here's part 7, the next test. A full emotional continuation, approximately 1,000 words of the inheritance test saga. It follows Emily years later, when she faces a moral test similar to Ethan's, proving how love and greed are tested across generations. It's cinematic, filled with emotion, redemption, and a powerful message for your audience, ending again with a strong question and a subscribe call. Part 7. The next test. 25 years had passed since Emily took over the Margaret Foundation. The once small house had grown into a network of homes across the country, thousands of children rescued, educated, and loved. To the world, she was Madam Emily Bennett, the woman who turned one man's promise into a legacy. But to the children, she was still Aunt Emily. And though her hair was streaked with silver now, her eyes carried the same gentle warmth that Ethan once saw in her when she was just 6 years old. One rainy evening, Emily sat in her office, surrounded by photos, Ethan's portrait, Margaret's old teacup, and the first drawing she'd ever made as a child at the foundation. But her thoughts were troubled. The board had called for a meeting, one that could change everything. The foundation was struggling financially. Donations had fallen. The government funding had slowed. A corporate investor, Bright Future Holdings, had offered a massive sum to take over part of the foundation's operations. But they wanted control to rename it, restructure it, and modernize it. Their CEO told her bluntly, "You'll have more money, better facilities, but you'll need to let go of the emotional stuff. The stories, the old symbolism. We're not in the business of nostalgia, we're in the business of results." Emily had smiled politely then, but her heart had ached. That night she sat alone by the window as the rain tapped gently against the glass. She whispered to herself, would Ethan have taken this deal? Or would he have trusted love one more time? The next morning, she visited the original house, the one where it all began. Dust floated in the sunlight that streamed through cracked windows. The scent of marigolds still lingered outside. She sat on the old rocking chair, the one Ethan used to sit on. Her hands brushed against the armrest, and her fingers touched something carved into the wood. 3 words, faint but clear. "Love decides everything." She smiled sadly. "Of course you'd say that, Uncle Ethan." Just then, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Bennett." It was a young boy, maybe 17, one of the current residents, named Ryan. He was bright, kind, but restless, much like Ethan had once been. He looked nervous. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I heard about the meeting." Emily nodded gently. "It's okay, Ryan. What do you think we should do?" He hesitated. "If you take their money, maybe more kids get food and shelter. Isn't that good?" Emily smiled faintly. "It is, but what happens when money starts deciding who deserves love?" He frowned. "I don't know." She patted his hand. "Neither did I once, but I learned sometimes love doesn't follow logic. It just does what's right, even when it's hard." That evening, the board meeting began. The investors sat across from Emily's sleek suits and impatient expressions. Their proposal lay on the table, millions in funding, but with conditions. The right to rename the foundation. The right to streamline the number of children admitted. The right to sell the original Bennett house. Emily looked around the table. Some of her team were afraid, others hopeful. Then she looked down at the photo of Margaret and Ethan that always sat beside her. For a moment, she felt as though they were both watching her, waiting for her answer. She stood slowly. "Thank you for your offer," she said softly. "But this foundation was not built on profit. It was built on promises that love would always come before money." The CEO leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, that's a lovely sentiment, but love doesn't pay bills." Emily met his gaze firmly. "No, but it changes lives, and that's worth more than any check you could write." Then with a calm smile, she slid the contract back across the table. We'll find another way. That night, the foundation's staff gathered around her, worried. What will we do now, Emily? We don't have enough to last the year. Emily took a deep breath. Then we do what we've always done, trust love and each other. Word spread quickly about her decision. People online began sharing Ethan's story again. Old students, families, and even strangers began donating what they could. A single story, the story of a mother who once tested her son's love, went viral again, reminding millions that kindness never goes out of style. And soon, help began to arrive from everywhere. Within months, the foundation was stable again, not because of one giant donation, but because of thousands of small ones, each from a heart that still believed. One afternoon, Ryan knocked on Emily's office door. He was holding a letter. I found this in the attic, he said. It's from Mr. Ethan. Emily's heart skipped. Another letter, Ryan nodded and handed it to her. The envelope was yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant but fading. She opened it carefully. To whoever carries on our work, there will come a day when you'll be asked to choose between what's easy and what's right. Choose love, even when it costs you everything, because love always pays you back, just not in the way you expect. Remember, the test never ends. It simply finds a new heart. Emily smiled through tears. She whispered, the next test, guess it was my turn. Ryan looked at her curiously. Did you pass? She smiled softly. Ask me again in 25 years. That evening, she walked through the garden as the sun dipped below the horizon. The marigolds glowed gold in the fading light. She whispered toward the sky, Mom, Ethan, I hope I made you proud. A soft wind brushed through the flowers, and somewhere far beyond the clouds, a familiar voice seemed to whisper back, You did, my child, you did. What would you have done if you were in Emily's place? Would you take the money to save more lives, or protect the heart of what love built? Tell me your answer in the comments. I read every one of them. And don't forget to subscribe for the next story in this emotional series, where love faces its toughest test yet. Read 30 years had passed since the day Emily found Ethan's letter in the attic. The Margaret Foundation, now called the house that love built, had become a symbol of hope across the world. There were homes in every major city, each carrying the same motto carved above the entrance. Love decides everything. Emily had grown old. Her once dark hair turned to silver, her steps slower, but her eyes still soft, still filled with the same light she'd seen in Ethan's all those years ago. And by her side stood a man who reminded her of her younger self, determined, compassionate, and brave. That man was Ryan, the same boy who once found Ethan's letter in the attic. He had grown into a kind-hearted leader, the face of the Foundation's new generation. It was late autumn when Emily called Ryan into her office. The room hadn't changed in decades. Margaret's teacup still sat on the shelf. Ethan's wristwatch still rested on the mantel. And on the wall hung a framed quote that Ethan had once written. Love never ends, it just changes hands. Ryan smiled as he stepped in. You wanted to see me. Emily looked up from her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she held an envelope. Yes, dear, sit down. He took a seat, eyes filled with warmth and respect. Ryan, she began softly, I'm getting older now, and this foundation, it needs someone with the strength to carry it forward. Ryan frowned. Don't say that, Aunt Emily, you're still the heart of this place. She smiled. Maybe, but even hearts need to rest someday. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside this is my final decision about the Foundation's future. But before I sign it, I need to know one thing. Her eyes locked onto his. Why are you here, Ryan? Is it because you love this work or because you love what it gives you? Ryan looked stunned. What it gives me, she nodded slowly. Recognition, respect, influence. You're admired everywhere. But I need to know, would you still do this if it gave you nothing? He was quiet for a long time. The rain pattered softly outside like a whisper from the past. Finally, he spoke. I came here because I wanted to be like you, Aunt Emily, like Ethan, like Margaret. But along the way, I started to realize something. This place doesn't just help children, it saves adults too. He took a deep breath. Because it saved me. Emily's eyes softened. When I first came here, I was angry at the world. I thought no one cared. But this home taught me something I'll never forget, that love doesn't wait for you to be perfect. It just shows up anyway. He smiled faintly. So if you're asking me if I'd still do this without the fame, the recognition, yes. I'd do it even if no one ever knew my name. Emily's eyes glistened. That's what I needed to hear. She slid the envelope closer. Then it's yours, the foundation and everything it stands for. Ryan shook his head in disbelief. Aunt Emily, I can't. She reached out and took his hand. You can, and you must. because love's greatest test is whether it can outlive the ones who started it. A few weeks later, Emily passed away peacefully in her sleep, just as Ethan had. Her funeral was simple, surrounded by hundreds of children, staff, and families whose lives she had changed. Ryan stood at the podium, his voice trembling. "She taught me that we don't inherit money, we inherit love. And it's our duty to spend it, not keep it." He looked out over the sea of faces, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Her love built this house. Now it's our turn to keep building." Years passed. Under Ryan's leadership, the foundation grew even further. But then, just like Ethan and Emily, his own test arrived. One day, a wealthy developer approached him with a tempting offer. They wanted to buy the original Bennett house, the one where it all began, and turn it into a luxury museum. "We'll preserve the history," the man said smoothly. "You'll receive millions in funding for your other projects. It's a win-win." Ryan hesitated. The foundation was struggling again. Inflation, funding cuts, rising costs, all of it was squeezing them hard. The logical choice was clear: sell the house, save the foundation. But the emotional choice, that was harder. That night, Ryan walked through the old house, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. He paused in front of the old rocking chair. Same one Ethan once sat in. The same one where Emily made her promise. He whispered, "Why does love always have to be tested?" And then, as if in answer, a soft breeze stirred through the open window. A marigold petal floated in, landing gently on the table beside him. He smiled faintly. "Okay, I get it." The next morning, at the meeting with the investors, Ryan spoke clearly and calmly. "The answer is no," he said. They blinked in surprise. "No, you do realize how much money we're offering?" He nodded. "I do, but some places aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be remembered." He stood tall, his voice steady. "This house isn't just wood and walls. It's where a mother tested her son's love and changed generations. It's where we all learned that the richest people are the ones who give their hearts away." He smiled gently. "And that's something you can't put a price tag on." That night, he returned to the garden, now filled with thousands of marigolds. He knelt down and whispered, "Margaret, Ethan, Emily, I hope I made you proud." The wind brushed through the flowers, carrying a faint whisper, almost like laughter. "You did, my son, you always do." Ryan closed his eyes, smiling. "The test never ends, huh?" The wind rustled again, soft and warm, as if saying, "No, but love always wins." And that, my friends, is the story of the final test. Read 3 generations, 1 legacy, proving that love, when passed on, never dies. But tell me in the comments, if you had to choose between wealth and keeping love's legacy alive, what would you do? Your answer might inspire someone today. And don't forget to subscribe, because our next story will remind you again that love, no matter how tested, always finds a way back home. The sun rose gently over the garden that had seen 3 generations of love, loss, and forgiveness. The marigolds were in full bloom again, bright, golden, swaying in the soft morning breeze. Ryan stood by the porch, his hands resting on the wooden railing that had weathered decades of stories. He had grown older now, streaks of silver brushing his dark hair. But his eyes, still kind, still filled with that same warmth Emily once saw, carried peace. Behind him, laughter echoed through the courtyard. Children running, painting, planting flowers, just as they always had. And among them was a small girl, maybe 8 years old, who reminded him of someone he couldn't quite name. Her name was Leela. She had arrived only a month ago, quiet, withdrawn, the kind of child who'd seen too much sadness for her age. But today, she was finally smiling, chasing butterflies between the marigolds. Ryan watched her quietly, his heart full. Later that day, he found her sitting on the old wooden bench beneath the willow tree, the same place where Ethan had once sat with Emily. Leela was holding a faded picture frame. Ryan sat beside her. "That's a nice photo you've got there." She looked up shyly. "It's my mom and dad, they're gone now." He nodded gently. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she shrugged. "It's okay. Miss Clara said they're in heaven now. Do you think they can see me?" Ryan smiled softly. "I think they never stop seeing you. Love doesn't end just because people do." She looked up, curious. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, looking at the sky. "Love is like the wind. You can't see it, but you can feel it. When someone loves you, that love doesn't disappear. It finds ways to stay. Sometimes in memories, sometimes in people who help you when you least expect it." Leela's eyes brightened. "Like you," he smiled warmly. "Maybe like me, or maybe like the flowers out there. They come back every year just to remind us that endings aren't really endings." That evening, Ryan sat in his office, the same desk Emily once used, the same bookshelves Ethan had filled. He opened an old wooden box, the one that had passed down through generations. Inside were three things: Margaret's letter, Ethan's watch, and Emily's ring. He touched each gently, whispering, "Thank you for teaching me everything." He closed his eyes, remembering their voices: Margaret's calm wisdom, Ethan's humility, Emily's gentle strength. He realized something then, something simple but profound. They were never really gone. They lived in him. And now they lived in Leela. Weeks later, the foundation hosted its annual gathering, a celebration of the house that love built. Families, alumni, and children filled the courtyard. Banners fluttered in the breeze. Ryan stepped up to the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, all touched, directly or indirectly, by the legacy that began with one woman's test of love. He took a deep breath. "Many years ago," he began softly, "a mother tested her son to see if he loved her or her wealth. That one choice, one act of faith, changed everything. It built this house, it built us." He smiled gently. "Each generation here faced the same question: would we choose love even when it cost us something? And every time love won, that's why we're still standing." He paused, looking toward the garden. "Because love never dies, it just finds new hearts to call home." After the ceremony, Leela ran up to him, holding a small handmade card. It was a drawing of the house surrounded by marigolds, with big letters written in crayon. "Thank you for my new family." Ryan smiled, tears filling his eyes. He knelt down. "That's beautiful, Leela. Can I keep it?" She nodded. "You have to. You're part of my family now." He laughed softly. "Then I'm the lucky one." That night, as the stars shimmered above, Ryan walked through the quiet garden. He stopped by the marigolds, looking up at the sky. "Margaret," he whispered, "your love is still here. It never left." The wind stirred the flowers gently, almost like a sigh. He smiled, whispering, "I'll keep the promise. I'll make sure the love you started never ends." Then he turned back toward the glowing house, filled with laughter, life, and light, and walked inside. Years later, when Ryan was gone, the foundation still stood. A young woman, grown-up Leela, now ran it. And just like those before her, she kept the wooden box on her desk, passing the lesson forward. The test never ends, but neither does love. Outside, marigolds danced in the sunlight. The camera panned upward from the flowers to the house, to the sky, as if love itself was watching, smiling. And that, my friends, is the end of this story, but not the end of love. Rose, because when love is real, it never fades. It only finds new hearts to live in. Speech Balloon, tell me in the comments, do you believe that love truly never dies? Or does it just change shape like in this story? And don't forget to subscribe, because more beautiful life stories like this are on the way, each one reminding us that love, no matter how tested, always finds a way home. Red.